So I specifically ask that you strike that provision from the resolution.
Sarah, can I ask a question, and can you stop her time? Yeah, while I'm doing that. Isn't the fact that it's a pilot give a chance to shape it and see? I mean, it's not a commitment to do anything. It's just seeing whether that's a helpful way to, if there's a way to integrate it.
Yes, I understand that it's a pilot approach, but from my perspective, as I said, I feel that all of our policymaking processes here at the board already look at cost of compliance, and that we are already receiving quite a bit of input from the regulated community as we look at each policy and permit about what it will cost. So I just don't understand the need to formalize that dynamic and to provide even more of a platform. I want to say that, I do appreciate the effort and time that staff has put into the Resource Alignment Initiative and that board members have put into the initiative. And I know that you've approached it with the best of intentions. I just felt that I must express my serious concerns with the work. Thank you.
Thank you. Colin Bailey, Environmental Justice Coalition for Water.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Colin Bailey, Executive Director of the Environmental Justice Coalition for Water, and I will admit I am very new to this issue. We have a small staff and cannot be involved in everything, but the issues, the concerns that Sarah Amanzadeh has raised from the California Coastkeeper are issues, if valid, that raise some concerns in our mind as well. And so I stand here to simply echo those concerns on her behalf. And am told by my colleague Jennifer Clary, whom you know well from Clean Water Action, that she would add her me too to those comments as well. I do not know if the invitation was extended to us. As you know, I've not been in this job all that long, but there are some concerns, as I've understood them this morning, that could implicate environmental justice. And certainly, as the son of an economist, I am sensitive to the idea that we do need to take into consideration not only cost of compliance, but all of the things that impact public health and the environment and the people on the ground, which is not only important in this context, but others we'll discuss later today. And so I add those, if you do not have to adopt this resolution today, perhaps there would be an opening for us to take further review, and we'd happily undertake that.
Thank you. And there's also an ongoing process for the other sectors as well.
Okay.
So
Well, hopefully we can plug in.
welcome your engagement. Steve Schimmick, Otter Project.
It's still morning, so good morning, everyone. Steve
I was
Schimmick
impressed that everybody knew that.
with the Otter Project in Monterey Coastkeeper, and I like to always start talks by thanking you all for your service. Thank you. I'm here to oppose the resolution and to support Sarah's comments from California Coastkeeper Alliance. I did speak on this issue when these work groups were being formed several years ago, a couple of years ago, or 2012, last year. It seems like a long time.
You've been here a lot. It'd be, easy to.
And I think my comments are consistent, and that's that I think that cost of compliance has to be looked at when you know a lot of other information, including cost to the environment and public health of non-compliance. To only look at one side, I think, gives you a skewed picture, and that's my criticism of this process. It is not a criticism of opportunity to comment, opportunity to participate. There was that opportunity given, and I appreciate that. And frankly, again, kind of like Colin, limited staff, limited budget, focus on things that, and as you know, we've been heavily involved in the ag stuff. But I'm just arguing that cost of compliance is one piece of a bigger picture, and cost of non-compliance, to my view, has not been looked at nearly as aggressively. To the question of, okay, what is success? What is the metric? We've already heard a speaker say, well, it's money saved. And money saved is frankly not a good measure unless you know the complete picture of was that money saved at the expense of public health or the environment? So that's my comment. We need to be looking at both sides of the picture. Cost of compliance is one side. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Garabedian, again, Friends of the North Fork.
Thank you, Madam Chair and board members. I think the most important thing I can do, given this opportunity to say anything at all today, is note the obituary this morning for Ruth Patrick, who died at 105 on Monday. She is, I think, the thing I would say about her is she is the mother of us all who work on water quality protection. Her picture was in the paper. We oppose this resolution in terms of the issues we work on, which are stormwater and municipal wastewater, and can't get past the opening paragraph of the draft resolution. It talks about, and even the agenda talks about, the purpose being to maintain water quality. Well, does that mean that costs are going to be contained when efforts are made to maintain water quality? Or does that mean, or is that the philosophy behind this, that when the costs of improving water quality aren't limited and can go sky high? That's not how I know a number of institutions would read it, who feel that water quality now is just fine and is going to be just fine for a long time, like the drinking water stakeholder group provided you with a whole report on that recently. And then, so it's maintain water quality and improve the regulatory program. Well, I've been exposed to people who know that that means deregulation to them. It means deregulation and put as much pollution as possible in the water without, well, that's it. Their goal is to put as much pollution as possible in the water. Now, the earlier part of your document refer to and this was referred to already, there's 171 people involved in the stormwater stakeholders and 75 involved in the wastewater stakeholders. So 11 days ago, I sent an email to the people listed on the website, Marie, Raphael, and Eric, and I said, please mail copies of wastewater NPDS stakeholder group participants. Haven't heard anything, but would certainly like to hear something. But frankly, we have a problem with the phase 2 work plan, which appropriately recommended the need for the regulated community involvement and and so forth in this process, but did not have a goal of public involvement and how to achieve it. And on that, the question is how to put together these stakeholder groups and what sort of guidelines there should be for them. And this board approved an ersatz, a stakeholder group that has self-formed in 2009 on the recycled water policy. We were excluded, and this board adopted them as their stakeholder group. We were excluded from participating with that group, going to their meetings or even listening on the phone. How can that be part of a stakeholder group? And there's an interesting question of like us on this issue today. We're late arrivers on this issue. Groups get established and develop their communication mechanisms and relationships over years, like the water quality group did. We got involved in that kind of late. So how do you deal with those things? Now, and how do you keep these groups from, what is the fine line between these groups being internal lobbying groups to the board, set up by the board under your authority to lobby you, basically? I don't know what that line is, but it should be addressed. So the mixing zones, look, I'll talk about two things. Mixing zones, which we haven't too much involvement in, and the water effects ratio.
Quickly.
Yes, well, on water effects ratio, the regional board has explained, we've looked at their report on one issue, but we've also talked to an expert who says that these aren't permitted by the EPA regulations. And so we're working on that issue and now see that by this recommendation, you're suggesting you go to EPA and get them involved in this. Kind of backwards.
Well, the issue is to try and get some clarity because there's confusion as between us and them and what they expect. And so you're just trying to get some clarity for everyone.
That's better than the way I read it. Thank you.
That's the intent.
And I'd just like to make it clear that the recycled water task force that was put together was not the State Water Board's task force. It was a task force of stakeholders, which included environmental groups. It included the coastkeepers, and it also included Heal the Bay. And they brought recommendations to us, but we did not form the group or control who was on the group.
That's my experience,
Yeah.
too.
But your earlier recommendation is duly noted, so we
Sorry?
need to, your
yes.
earlier recommendation is duly noted. We do need to think about stakeholder participation in some more structured way.
Yes,
So
and I
thank
think
you.
that's exactly an issue for this ongoing process. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next is Debbie Webster, Executive Officer, Central Valley Clean Water Association.
Good morning, Chair Marcus and board members. Debbie Webster, Executive Officer of the Central Valley Clean Water Association. And first, I'd like to say that I support this resolution and appreciate Board Member Dodok's, the staff's dedication to working with the stakeholder groups. As the executive officer of Civiqua, I participated in the MPDS work group, which also covered the WDR POTWs, those that have that. Just after hearing some of the discussion, I want to address a couple things. We started with the premise that this was about protecting water quality, and we weren't going to go anywhere where it was going to compromise water quality. And that is still a tenet. And I want to say those POTWs that I represent, that is what they do day in and day out. We really feel like we're partners in this, and that we partner with regional boards and the state board on ensuring that our water quality is protected. And we're committed to that. So for that reason, we're looking at ways where we can better realign our resources with our priorities, better realign things so that we can get those water quality benefits. And so I want to say, I think that this resolution goes towards some of those ideas and thoughts that we've brought up. I'd really ask for your support and just for your continued engagement in this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Kira Redmond, Executive Director, Santa Barbara Channel Keeper.
Good morning, Chair, members of the board. Kira Redmond, Executive Director of Santa Barbara Channel Keeper. I'm here to oppose this resolution for the reasons outlined by my colleagues at the Otter Project and California Coastkeeper Alliance. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeanette Pantoja from California Rural Legal Assistance.
Hello, board members, and it's Jeanette Pantoja.
Sorry, you're correct.
It's
I'm
fine.
sorry.
Everybody messes it up.
I know, I'm sorry, and I even know how to do that, so I apologize.
And so I'd just like to voice my support for California Coastkeeper, and specifically kind of by throwing out an illustration that I read in Scientific American last week. So it's not directly related to water quality, but it does comment on environmental economics, which is a little hobby of mine. So in the 1980s, Indian cattle raisers began using the medication diclofenac. And diclofenac is poisonous to vultures. And so what you saw after that was within 15 years, there was a 95% decline in the vulture population. And without them serving their vital environmental, how do you say it, like their role, there was a boom in the rat and feral dog population. And so India went through a rabies epidemic, and they have the largest per capita rabies deaths. And so the health-associated costs for the Indian economy figured in about 34 billion within 14 years. So if you're not considering the cost to public health, the cost to the economy, the cost to the environment, you can very quickly see that the costs on the other side are much greater than what they would be to the dischargers. So just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeanette. Questions, comments?
I personally, I appreciate the opposition that folks have raised to this, but it was much too unilateral, and I'll just offer that as the kind of way I perceived it. It was no, don't go there. Do not ever change any requirement that that regional boards or the state board has ever put in place, because it will create havoc, problems, degradation, etc. That we just can't operate as we move forward, being more responsive to the environmental needs that we have out there, dealing with the priority needs that we have out there. We have got to be able to work nimbly in terms of reevaluating how we are performing and making changes where necessary and where important and where it will not hurt the environment. So I appreciate your making your point, and clearly you have created an expectation that we will absolutely want to hear more from you in the future as we move down this path. But in no way did it, in fact, it made me even more sure that we absolutely have to keep moving down this path of looking at how we're doing and making changes where we need to make those changes. And so that's my thought. And thank you, Tam, for getting us started.
I just want to ditto what everyone said about Board Member Dodick and the staff and the stakeholder involvement in this process. Of course, it's just a given in government, in any system. You always have to look about a better way to do things, a more efficient way to do things. And I see plenty of references throughout the resolution that we are dedicated to maintaining water quality protections. That's very clearly stated in the resolution. So I'm very much in support of this. I think that where we can reduce cost of compliance, where there's no sacrifice to water quality, we need to move in that direction, because a stronger economy means that we will have a more clean environment, because that's the quickest path to cleaning up the environment, is if we have a strong economy. So I think that this is definitely headed in the right direction, and it should just be a principle of ours even after these groups are finished. We should always be looking for a better way of doing things.
Thanks, my fellow board members, for their comments. I think, yeah, the opposition to this that has been voiced, I feel it might have been oversimplified, and I understand. It symbolically it appears we're only looking at one side of the coin, but actually there's another coin at play. If this helps at all, there's the cost of compliance, but then there's the fact that our agency has moved from a general fund funded agency system to a fee-based agency system, and so there's that coin about raising fees, and then what does it cost to comply with what we're requiring, and so there's another coin out there besides the issues that have been brought up about water quality protection. And I think we're moving more, as we heard all day today, to a more collaborative approach, more of a team approach, and I encourage the environmental stakeholders to recognize that the agricultural, the municipal, the industrial stakeholders are putting within their missions the environmental protections, the water quality protections. It's happening. In my career lifetime, there's been a cultural shift, okay? And so we need to be sophisticated in government. We're looking at being more efficient, delivering our services to the environment and to the public. In the environmental community, I encourage you to be more sophisticated and find those partnerships and those overlaps with the citizens you live next door to who care about the environment and who work in these different sectors. Partnership and teamwork is the key. And so when we look at cost of compliance, it fits within that framework of building partnership and trust and getting environmental outcomes. So that's why I'm in support of this direction, because it's an honest review of our efficiencies, and we do not compromise the importance of public health protection and environmental protection. Thanks.
I want to take a moment and, again, acknowledge the work of Eric and regional board staff and others in this effort, acknowledge the work of the various stakeholders, and also say that I appreciate both the support as well as the opposition heard today. And to Sarah and her NGO colleagues, I take your comments today as your indication that you're going to be participating very, very closely in the efforts that are being proposed in the resolution. I think if you read the resolution, with the one exception of the monitoring and reporting, the new revised monitoring and reporting program that our executive director approved for sanitary sewer overflows, the rest are simply setting up the stage for stakeholder engagement in discussing various issues. And you know, personally, I was hoping to be able to accomplish more, but recognizing how challenging it was for all the stakeholders, even the wastewater treatment plant folks whom we've been regulating for 30 plus 40 years, to provide the documentations of cost to come up with what are, in my opinion, pretty reasonable, conservative recommendations that really do uphold the water quality protection, I think, objectives we all share. And so the resolution, in my mind, I think, you know, with one exception that Tom took care of for us, responded to the recommendations from the wastewater groups in the form of setting up that collaboration for further discussion and to truly, you know, walk that tight rope between identifying cost-saving measures and maintaining water quality protection. And, you know, let's get real here. I think I don't, and I don't think any of the POTWs who, even though they spoke in support today on this resolution, believe that this is going to result in, you know, millions and billions of dollars of savings, because if it does, and I hope it does, that simply means that that will be shifted to other activities to protect water quality. I think, you know, it's a nature of all of our programs and efforts that, to the extent that, you know, we borrow from Peter to pay Paul, that's just the way it is in terms of the resources we have these days. So as much as, you know, I would like to say, oh gosh, you know, we will be saving billions of dollars, I think the reality is that, you know, and you've heard today, we are looking to redirect resources toward priorities where we can accomplish the most water quality protection outcomes. And I think I, you know, appreciate everyone's involvement, and I thank the environmental community for showing up today, and I will take your comments today as your commitment to participate in this effort in going forward. So with that, I will move for adoption of this item with the change sheet.
All right.
And I second.
Terrific. But I want to say something before we vote, if you don't mind.
Now's the time.
If you don't mind.
The chair always gets the last word.
That's right. I really have to take advantage of that, don't I? I haven't figured that out yet. I just want to say a couple things. Colleagues have spoken. I understand the fear of overkill, and I also understand the sense that we haven't done enough, and that water quality and public health and environmental protection is precious, and that there's further we need to go collectively, not just as a board, but as a society. And so I take those comments very seriously and think hard about it, and I'm committed to it, as I know my colleagues are. I would just say in this particular instance, the whole premise has been to only do things that are as an experiment or as an effort to try and reduce costs where it's not going to have an impact. And frankly, looking at these recommendations, they seem very benign and very mild to me compared to the stuff I know is out there from having been both an environmental advocate and a waste discharger being regulated. And it is very hard when you're in that setting to justify your rate increases, everything you're spending. You have to explain it to your council, your board members, the public, when you know that money could be spent on other environmental things or other important things like keeping after school programs going, et cetera. And I just think we need to be responsible in trying to do that under these premises, especially after so many years. I just think it's a responsible piece that gives us more credibility when we go hard on standards and the like. So I do think it's a good thing to do, and I do think that these recommendations are either relatively mild or are caveated so much that we shouldn't see a problem. And philosophically, I understand the concern, but I really think our commitment to water quality is so strong that I don't think we're spending too much time on the cost of compliance. I think it's an important public policy thing that we, as responsible public officials, we have to think about. And I actually appreciate the fact that the stakeholder groups, I'll just speak to MPDS, wanted a laundry list that was infinitely longer than this, and I could have made it even longer. And so I think figuring out how to choose these things that we can do is a really important step and acknowledgement. So I realize that if you haven't been living in that space or haven't had what you felt were pin-headed paperwork requirements put on that didn't have a direct reaction to water quality, it's hard to see, but having seen it at times, I think this is a welcome baby step to try and make something responsible happen. But I totally understand the fear of that. I view it politically, I think that overkill on paperwork or process breeds a hostility to the underlying water quality goals that then carries forth in the public domain and the political domain that all of these guys live in day to day, and we're trying to limit that by being tough on standards and flexible on implementation. I think that really is in the modern era where we have to go for sustainability, and particularly as we're going to have to start looking at climate change and the issues of integrating water, air, all of those things in a way we should have done 30 years ago. We're going to just need to figure out how to be a little more flexible. So this seems reasonable to me. So with that, I heard a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Resolution carries. Thank you. Next, item 8.
Good afternoon, Chair Marcus and board members. Darren Paul-Hemus, Deputy Director of the Division of Administrative Services. Of course, now that you've given them some money back, I'm here to take it. It's no small irony in that, I'm sure. Before I get started, at the beginning, I do want to point out that we do, at the back of the room, have a revised change sheet, and we did, at late last hour, do an update to the staff report and the proposed regulations. So for those in the audience that haven't grabbed that, please grab that or haven't noticed that. So as you know, this is our annual fund gathering to talk about fees. And this is the water quality fees that we're going to talk about in particular today. I know certainly, and by reading the comments, that there is, unending weariness with the fact that the fees that we have issued over the years have continually climbed, and people are, probably at the end of their rope. I do want to note that, of course, last year we did not raise fees, and that leads a little bit to the story for this year. So when you look at our increase, we're asking this year for an increase of $18.9 million overall for the Waste Discharge Permit Fund. And the storyline that leads into that a little bit is that, of course, we didn't raise fees last year, knowing that kind of we were going in on two things. One, that we had some reserve funds that we would expend, and we did expend those. In fact, we expend those into the negative amount. And that we had a furlough for state employees that was agreed upon by the represented employee unions, and that when we calculated those amounts, that we could squeak by a year with no increase. But I do recall specifically, I sat here before, maybe even this very chair, and said that that pretty much guaranteed that we would be facing a fee increase this year. And of course, here I am a year later to basically say that. I'm back. Briefly, I'll go over the cost drivers for this year's fee increase. This is covered in our staff report, but for those listening to kind of cover it, we have basically, as I mentioned, the furloughs for employees is no longer around, and so that cost increase has increased our budget. We have employee health care costs have gone up, as they've gone up for everybody in our society, and so that's also reflected. We have a pro rata increase, which is what I pay to other state control agencies that look out for us or control us, and so that fee, my tithing to them, has gone up. That's reflected as well. We have 2 increases to our budget. These are the 2 minor increases that are also incorporated. The beach monitoring program was increased from $1 million to $1.8 million, so there's $800,000 of additional funding associated there. And as well, 5 positions were added to the irrigated lands regulatory program by the legislature through the budget process that are also reflected in increased fees for that particular program only. And as I mentioned as well, we are including parts of our fee to recapture and create a bit of a reserve, so not only build us back to a balance, but to going forward. At the end of this year, I got congratulated for actually going in the red by Mr. Tom Howard, our executive director. He was proud that we had cut it so close that we actually got to the point where we were in the red a little bit, and so we had to do some fine juggling at the end. So I do want to assure you that we're nowhere near comfortable, and I get a little bit nervous thinking about just a 3% reserve, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But we are doing everything we can to get full maximum value from the fee payers and the fees that are paid to us, and of course do the good work that we do that you've seen here today. I'll move to address 2 kind of main areas of comments we got from comment letters, and I'm sure you'll hear from the folks that are coming in about this, but since I'm first at the mic, I get to first mention them, I guess. One of the areas talked about is the stormwater, and folks have basically said that, you know, we continue to increase their fee while at the same time, for the past numerous years, we over-projected their expenditures to their revenues, and in essence, in some way, you could look that we built up some excess, or they contributed beyond their particular share of how we've adjusted our fees. And that's certainly true. I'd like to explain a couple little things, and in the in the staff report, we've included another sheet, I think, that helps to partially explain a little bit more detail. So, you know, we're always in a balance between how much numbers do we give out and then making it too complex for people to follow along. And as many in the discharger group will know, we are an open book, and we are always open to full conversations with dischargers and fee payers about our numbers and where that comes from in detail, when we can spend a lot of time and do that. And I'd say that invitation is open to anyone that wants to go through it. But what you see in this sheet that we've added, it's basically taking attachment 3 that was in the staff report and adding some budget numbers to it as well, because there's really another piece that was missing from the sheet that showed the revenues versus expenditures. So one of the first things that you'll see if you look at the other sheet is that we're actually much better at setting our fee revenues projections towards our anticipated budget for the year. So to me, that indicates that, you know, our methodologies at least are a little sounder when it comes to what was represented by that original attachment 3, that when we have a budget going in for the year for the programs, that we do hit the targets pretty well. Of course, that moves the problem over to the fact that our expenditures are different from our revenues, and that's something I'll commit to look into more as to how that does. But generally, we do treat our programs such that they're a bit fungible, and regional board staff and state board staff managers are allowed to address priorities as they come up. And of course, we do our budgeting so far in ahead that it's often hard to hit exactly where expenditures need to be. And so there's going to be some amount of error there just in the system that we have if we want to remain flexible and not say, no, don't go do that good idea because I didn't budget for it this year and you have to wait until next year. So, a little bit of room there will be necessary. The other thing that I would mention is that as far as revenues go, so government accounting uses an accrual-based system, and on the revenue sheet on attachment 3, that does project all the revenue bills we sent out, not all that we collected, and the collected number is a bit different. Not dramatically so, but certainly in certain programs a fair amount so that it does impact it. And we do take that into consideration, but I think we could probably do a better job of displaying that particular piece of information, or at least on the side, to try to bring that around to help with those numbers and fine tune them a little bit to see. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it's still going to represent that stormwater sector is basically overpaid their proportionate fee compared to the expenditures that we did ultimately see in the program, but I don't think it's as dramatic as is there, and we can adjust for that factor. The second area of major comment was from our what we call the CAF program, or the Confined Animal Feeding Program, so I'll just call it CAF for short. And in essence, they were pointing out that there's a specific water code section when we consider the amount of fees that we have to consider the price setting mechanisms associated with certain, particular the CAF industry, and dairies being the largest one of the group that we do have fees for. And so I did want to relay that certainly I wasn't here, but back when the original CAF fee was removed from the WDR program, and I have it on a good source from our executive director who was here, that was part of the consideration of creating the separate fee category for CAF and not keep them under the WDR program, where they would have naturally fallen. If they were there, they would be regulated on a threat and complexity level, and their fees would be dramatically much higher compared to what they, how we were anticipating that dairies would be rated as a threat and complexity. Certainly large dairies are akin to small cities in some fashion, and so they would be parallel to that, and that would be a much larger fee. So that consideration went into the fact that the CAP program was separated out, created, kind of in our own accounting point, and that we looked at just the staffing and resources that we allocate to the program, and then funded the CAP program associated directly from that so that it would be there. So in this year's original staff proposal, we proposed a 46% increase for the CAP program, certainly the largest of all of the categories. This was driven by basically all of the cost drivers I mentioned before, plus then an additional one that we have continued to see a decline in revenues from the CAP program. So a bit of one of those government gotchas where, as your industry's reducing and feeling the pain, and we're not shrinking because our budget's staying the same, that, we go for more fees from who's left standing. A bit of a problem, but I don't really know how to remedy that factor. But in light of the fact that it is a very large fee increase, the challenges that the CAP program faces, and I'm sure they will highlight that for you as they have to me as well, and so I won't steal their thunder there, but we have proposed a staff change that we would reduce the amount that we propose to collect in this year's and basically stage this fee increase. So we're not saying ultimately we won't get there, but to stage it in 2 stages so that this year we would basically match what the WDR program increase is, which is approximately 27%. That we would then commit to work with the CAP program to see, if, going into next year's fee allocation, how we might either restructure their fee, because that would be one way to increase revenue, but then possibly adjust the burdens within their particular fee payer group such that it's more appropriate, and involve a stakeholder process to see if that's there, and then ultimately would recommend then capturing the remaining portion, basically the $500 and some thousand we're delaying in collection this year.
Wait, so that would mean, just to be clear, that assuming because a lot of these increases are because the furloughs are over and different contracts, different things have gone into effect, that conceivably next year we would have the other half or another chunk of raise for them, and the raises for the other categories would presumably be lower.
I believe that'd be correct, yeah. I would probably put money on the table that there will be some small increase next year. I mean, we kind of ultimately,
We don't
like
want you
all
to have to do another I told you so
right,
in 2 years.
right,
so.
right, exactly. But you know, it's just part of the inflationary process. There's always some cost increases that are going there. Certainly, I know on the horizon there will be some staff cost increases. Several unions have negotiated future pay increases that will be borne by this, but none of them this year. But there's some of that effect. And so, yes, there will probably, everybody's a little bit small, but at this point, if basically the board approves this proposal, then we would see a larger increase for CAF to try to continue to capture that. And I should mention, you know, the question will be, I've always said that this is a zero-sum game, so you take money out of one pocket, you got to put it back in the other. And that's true here. What we are, in essence, doing, though, is not asking the other fee payers to cover this minor reduction, and the CAP program is certainly a very small amount, such that we are basically reducing the level of reserve that I've asked for from 3.6% to 3%. Again, that makes me super nervous, but it certainly, you know, is a balancing point between what to do here and there, faced with what we have to do. And so we will certainly run the gauntlet and see if hopefully 3% gets us through the year. And it very likely means that we would, you know, if we miss on that number too much, then part of our increase next year as well would need to be watching our revenue base there. So, and with that, I will conclude, unless you have any questions.
I'm board chair and board members, David Ceccarelli, State Water Board. We just noticed that attachment 3, the revised attachment 3 that's in the package, does not have the fiscal year 12-13 figures in it, so the numbers are not totaling up. We're in the process of making that change and sending it to Janine so it can be posted on the screen, and we'll have revised copies in the back. So the attachment that Darren was mentioning on the last page of the package doesn't have the fiscal year 12-13 figures in it.
Yeah, in the column.
In
It
the
was
column.
actually an error we caught last night, but it looks like the wrong one snuck in. There's a hidden row in the spreadsheet, and so when it prints out, it's not displaying
Oh.
2012-13. So if you added up the numbers, they're not going to add up with the missing row, obviously.
When are we going to have the,
Within the next 5 minutes.
all right. Interesting question. I've had to handle that. If we go to, well, let's see if there are questions from the board members, and then we'll go to public comment, but come back to this, and might have to, I don't want to reopen public comment. Does it?
Yeah, it doesn't, it's just an information component of the process. So you could get the numbers if you look at the 12-13 year that we put on the original attachment 3. Again, we just tried to add on some additional information on the sides of those two columns, so.
Yeah, just, it's hard to understand that without seeing the actual chart, so.
Are you talking about these charts?
No, those are attachments, different one.
Oh, I don't even.
All right, well, are there any questions first from the board? All right, well then, let's go to the, we'll go to the comments. We have quite a few, and I'm going to ask that people hold themselves to 3 minutes. First, I have Roberta Larson, Executive Director of CASA.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I'm Bobby Larson, the Executive Director of CASA. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I do have to register a concern about your blue card because I'm supposed to check oppose or support. I did not check support in
right. It
terms
gives
of,
you the
of
option.
being
It's
here
not
to support the fees, but I also didn't check oppose, and that's because I don't like to check oppose on my cards unless I have a better idea for you. I like to come up here and say, don't do that, do this instead. Well, I have no this instead here. So instead of doing that, I just wanted to give you a couple of brief comments one question and one request.
Okay.
The brief comments are, look, this battle for us was lost in the legislature. They set your appropriations limit. We get that. We've tried in the past ad nauseum to come up with a different way to rearrange the chairs to get to a different, there's winners and losers. It doesn't work. So I don't really have any suggestions for you. I understand why you're proposing to do what you're proposing to do, and just really want to thank you for your action on the previous item, which I think is a recognition that you do care about the costs to us in the regulated community. You do care about our ratepayers. Board Member Moore and Chair Marcus said it better than I could in terms of having an appreciation that this is not, you know, unlimited. It's not boundless, that we can just keep raising more money to do more things. We'd all like to do more things. We'd all like to have the money to do it, but we live in a real world where it's people that pay this money. So I appreciate you moving forward on the resource alignment so that we can come up with some ways to maybe ease the pain a little bit. So my question has to do with the ambient monitoring programs, and you know, they're a percentage on the base fee. I think Gamma is 9.5% and Swamp is 20-some%. My question is, as these fees increase, that amount increases as well, and I'm curious as to what budget rigor is paid to that, in that it's just an escalating number along with the fee numbers. How does that relate to a budget, and how is that target number calculated? And then my request is, I know that the Water Code says you can do this by emergency regulation, and I know sometimes in the past you've had to. When the legislature doesn't do the budget until October, you don't have any choice. Well, when you do have a choice, when they actually get their act together and adopt the budget on time, I would really request that you consider not doing this by emergency regulation. There were 10 days to comment on this. Your staff, who I have tremendous respect for, has been up all night trying to get this information together, trying in a lot of ways to be responsive to comments they received. But I can tell you, to come in and get this change sheet and not understand it all, and to be in a position of, I don't know what the changes mean, let alone tell you what I think of them, I would really urge you to, you know, take a little more time and make sure that everybody understands what's being done. Thank you.
Thanks. Darren, do you want to respond to those two things?
Sure. So for the swamp fee component, she's correct that, you know, we've kept the percentage the same, but the reality is that the program has not gone up. We're actually trying to get rid of the surcharge, so we're kind of in this phasing between just charging you a fee that includes a component that you pay for swamp, and so it's kind of built in. It's always confused folks that there was the fee and then there was the add-on, and so I'd like to have just the fee with a swamp component. So in essence, even though the 21%'s there, the extra that's generated just goes to cover the base fee and the regulatory programs that are there. And if I could, I'd just get away from even having a 21% or a component of, you know, a ratio on top of what's there, and just say, you know, here's your charge, and then itemize it. So much went to swamp, so much goes to planning and basin planning, so much is core regulatory program. I think that's really a fair representation of how the fee should be displayed.
Why are we doing it this way? Is it an artifact of some
It's an
decision?
artifact that we haven't completely erased yet, correct?
Can you say by next year you will erase it?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah,
There
we
you
could
go.
go very
Because
easily.
we know you remember what you say to us, so
Yes,
that we know
exactly.
that next year we know.
No, yeah, I'd be happy to do that, actually. If the board's pleasure was to do that, it'd be very easy for us to make that switch and switch over to then a more itemized type of approach.
But what about the emergency reg request?
I missed exactly what she said there. I mean, we do have emergency reg provisions to do this. You know, we start this conversation with folks, and that's kind of an open question as well, is when should we start talking about fees? One year we started in March. Of course, we then had to amend it after the budget changes and stuff like that, and so people were mad at me about the fact that I gave them a phony number at the beginning and it changed all the way through. And then I tried afterwards so that the numbers were more solid, and then the answer is you didn't warn us early enough. It's really one of those no wins. I'm happy to maybe have two conversations. Those that want to come early, warn them that the numbers are hard to do. But ultimately we get to this point and we need to you know, do regs rather quickly, and we have this very nice provision that allows us to do it for the emergency process. Otherwise we wouldn't be able to get fees in place in time in order to begin collecting them throughout the year and fund our programs and keep going. So certainly there's other ways to try to notice it and get it out, and we can take suggestions on that. But I think the emergency regs are kind of essential for us to be able to do that. We can commit to different types of notification and conversations as people want to have them, just on our own provision to do that if the board so desires, and if we can find a consensus of folks who would like to do that.
But and maybe I'm just not understanding, but isn't there a range between starting in March and doing it in an emergency that just gives, so you'd have 2 weeks notice and time for more conversations, or?
Well, I think there's maybe just a bit of a disconnect. I mean, the emergency reg component, and my attorney to my left can help me out here shortly if I get too deep into this, allows us expedited regulatory procedures is really all it does, so that we can, from the time the board acts, to get this thing through quickly.
The implementation.
Right.
So in the future, we could give people more time to comment and still use the emergency reg
Sure,
process.
absolutely.
I would
That's what I'm
advise that,
saying.
because this became a really tight period of time, even for all of us, to meet with you and talk to everyone.
Yeah, I think we did do, when did we do the workshop?
The stakeholder meeting was done in May.
Right.
Yeah.
We started in May with
Right.
stakeholder conversations. We briefed board members in early summer as basically tailing that, knowing that you would get people responding. It's always hard to do that. But we'll commit again to some different form of output that the stakeholders suggest would be best for them. I mean, that's what I want to do, is make sure they're informed and you're informed and the process there.
Right, I just want more time from proposal till this meeting, just a little bit.
Okay.
Other questions? Okay. Next is Kara Martinson from CSAC.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the board. I'll be brief because I think a lot of my comments were made by Ms. Larson and also by staff. I'm here this afternoon on behalf of the California State Association of Counties, the Rural County Association, as well as the League of California Cities. And we do share a broad concern with the proposed fee increase. As was mentioned, this proposal does come on the heels of an increase not last year, but the previous year, which equates to about roughly, I think, about a 60% increase over the last 3 years, which is quite the expense to our local budgets. Also, the expedited time frame, allowing us to have more input into the process. As you mentioned, a longer comment period would be much appreciated. And then also, we do have a concern that was mentioned by staff with regards to the specific stormwater component of the overall program. We feel that the stormwater program does bear the burden, essentially, in subsidizing some of the other components of the larger program. So we do ask today that the board postpone taking action on this item. We understand the difficulty in satisfying all stakeholders, but would appreciate, I think, an extended period of time to provide input into this process and be able to perhaps come up with some solutions to offer to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jeff Brosseau, Executive Director of CASCWA. In your first of two hats.
Yes.
Oh, you're going to do them both in a row because you
thank
turned in
you.
both your
Thank you.
cards. All right. So, will the real Jeff Brosseau?
I should have brought both hats with me. Okay.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm Jeff Brosseau, Executive Director for the California Stormwater Quality Association, or CASCWA. And thank you, Chair Marcus and board members, for the opportunity to comment on this item today. And I want to thank staff as well for meeting with us and talking with us about the challenges of budgeting for, in particular, the stormwater component of the fund. And I want to echo many of Bobby's comments as well to you, particularly on the swamp issue and the scope of work really that goes with that additional fee, as well as the concerns about the emergency regulation mechanism and always using that necessarily. And we're not here to make huge comments about the total amount of money you're looking for, $18.9 million. What we have major concerns with is our share of that, basically, because I think Bobby used the term winners and losers. I think we feel like we've been the loser like every year, basically, for like 12 years in a row. And as a result, if you look at the virtual balance on either attachment 3 or attachment 5, you'll see that stormwater is the only program, there's actually no money there, but virtual money there, virtual balance that shows that we've been in the black, and considerably so compared to the other discharge classes. And so we're looking for some relief there, and that's what we really are hoping to see at some point. And I think what we're asking the board to do is give some policy direction to staff, because staff is, I mean, I feel their pain. It's a very challenging thing to budget for, and I have extensive conversations with Darren in particular about this. But I think it's what's really necessary now to try and address this sort of systemic problem with the stormwater budget is to have a direction from the board to staff that says, first of all, we get the problem with the stormwater piece of the pie. Something's wrong there. We need to do better in terms of making that more closely aligned with what either the expenditures are or what the budget is, so that they're not losers every single year and essentially become the bank to the other 5 or 6 or 7 program types. And then set your intentions formally to actually figure out a way to slowly reduce that overage over a period of years. We didn't get into this position where stormwater is overpaying overnight. It's happened over the last 12 years. So we're not expecting a solution that's going to solve the problem tomorrow. We're open to the idea of doing it over a series of years, but we think that there should be a formal sort of rebalance plan or factor that would be added into the calculations that would slowly bring the stormwater overage down to something closer to zero. And actually, we would recommend that that would be put in place not just for stormwater, but for anybody who, any of the program types who starts to trend too high or too low compared to where they should be, so that the rebalancing factor could be added in at the end to say, okay, that program is trending too high over the last 2 or 3 years, let's bring them back down. That program is trending too low over the last 7 years. So nobody is subsidizing anybody for too long, potentially. And so it's kind of a rebalancing plan option. I don't know whether you can do that today. I'm not sure to what extent the board feels compelled to adopt these regs today, to this resolution today. And I think in our ideal world, you would wait 2 weeks or 30 days, think about a rebalancing option a little bit. What that means is the stormwater 27.5% would come down a little bit, and my fellow discharges, I hate to say, would come up a little bit. But that's what seems fair, because we've been overpaying for a long time, essentially subsidizing their programs, it looks like. And then we come back and look at maybe some slightly different numbers. Absent that ability to do that, maybe wait 2 weeks or wait 30 days. What I would say, and the reason why I marked my card opposed with recommendations, because I like Bobby, don't like to necessarily just oppose. My recommendation is if you adopt the fee schedule as it is today with a 27.5% for stormwater, that you also make part of the resolution a direction to staff saying, work out a rebalance plan, a rebalance factor, whatever you want to call it, that looks at the stormwater piece in particular, but could be used for other discharge types over time, and make that a factor as part of the 14-15 budgeting process. And I also should say quickly that Mark Gray, who from Kickwick, the construction industry, also wanted to, he couldn't be here today, but he asked me to express his concerns about the stormwater piece and to say that Kickwick and the construction industry supports CASCO's position and recommendation on this issue as well.
All right, Jeff, before you change hats, you know, I've looked at this a lot, spent time talking to you, spent time talking to staff, and I do understand how if you look at everything else, you're the one, regardless of what the number is, that's over time, since we've been doing this or keeping records, been more of the donor. I totally get that. But it'd be hard to come up with a formal rebalance, because the whole thing is an artifice to cover our costs, and I think if we were trying to figure out how to get it to zero, I mean, we'd be spending an incredible amount of time on that, and you'd have to pay for an additional staffer across all of this to figure it out. But as I look at it, it is true, if you look back to 2005 over time, that you are the donor, but it's the first 2 years where we seem to have gotten it wrong for a variety of reasons, and then it's been higher, well, maybe then another one of those years, and then the last 2 years you've been underpaying, so we're on the right course with that. Where I would be concerned is if we came back next year and your numbers weren't, you know, they were going back up again. I mean, in some ways. So I do, and we'll think about it, I do think it's important to be mindful of this and try to keep that fairness as between groups, but trying to do an exact calculation would be difficult, and it's hard to say to if we're trying to get our guesses better over time, and we got them wrong in your favor last time by a bit, it's hard for me to say to the other stakeholders that they're going to pay more this year because in '05 and '06 we guessed something wrong, which is kind of what you're asking. Maybe in the other 2 years a little bit too, but that's where the biggest jumps are, I guess, '09. So it's just hard to do. I appreciate you making a suggestion for what we might do in the future, and I'm thinking about how I want to suggest that to staff, but trying to do an accounting method to try and rebalance to zero is, you then have to say over what period of time and in what context, et cetera, when in fact we have to look at a whole series of factors. And a lot of the reason that these fees have been so much overall to everyone is just because of reality, that stuff costs more and the legislature's decided we should be fee-based. It's not just because we want to raise your fees and take your money. We want to do our jobs, and I think most of us feel that we don't have anywhere near the staff we need to do the job either that's needed to protect the environment or to do it with the kind of time it takes to do stakeholder and public engagement, which of course takes a lot of time. If you were just sitting in your office trying to come up with a scientific or engineering answer, doesn't take anywhere near as much time as engaging the public. So I'm not disagreeing with, I totally understand where your association's coming from, but it is, and if your numbers were again the same in the last 2 years, I'd be all over it. But it feels like our trend is starting to go in the right way, which is sort of a better thing. So again, still listening and thinking about it, but it's what you're asking. I get why you're asking, but it's hard to do it.
Can I make an observation on your?
On my observation? You may make a brief one, since I made a long observation.
In terms of getting it right or wrong or up or down, I think if you look across all those tables, you'll see that in the years where stormwater was under-collected from, so the other programs were also under-collected from, and we're over-collected from, the other ones tend to be over-collected from. So I'm not sure we're relatively winning or losing. I think we're basically feel like we've been relatively losing over a period of time. As we've said before, I think we're looking for a more intentional solution to this, because the sense in the community that I work with, the cities and counties, is they're not sure the water board sees this as a problem, which is sort of shocking to them. And then they say, well, why aren't they addressing this? We don't do municipal budgeting this way. Why can't they address this problem? So I think even though it's been fortuitous last couple of years, they're hoping to see something more intentional from the board, from the policy level, saying, we get it, and here's our plan for trying to at least address it to some degree.
Duly noted. Okay, next hat.
Okay, now I'm Jeff Brosseau, the Executive Director for BASNA, which is the Bay Area Stormwater Management Agencies Association, which surprisingly strongly supports CASCWA's recommendations and concerns expressed about this agenda item. I just want to mention sort of 3 areas of concern. One of them is, I know, it's kind of schizophrenic in a way, I guess, huh? The one area
diametrically that would be challenging.
Who am I today? There's sort of 3 areas of concern for the Bay Area stormwater programs. One is the swamp surcharge issue, which is, as Darren mentioned, is 21% on top of the fee. So as the fee goes up, the swamp dollars go up as well, just automatically. But we never really know where's the extra money going to. We haven't seen scopes of work. We haven't seen. You're getting more money for swamp, but so where's the money going? So I think it would be nice to get, maybe going back to, maybe we should be working with our regional water board more closely to find out where is the swamp money going in our region. Some of the things that were mentioned in earlier agenda items, maybe another place to put that information, either it's in the performance report you looked at earlier this morning, or maybe the stormwater, if there's going to be a stormwater audit like the NPDES wastewater audit you're doing now, maybe that's the place to say.
That would be review.
This is where your money's going in terms of the swamp increases. So when they're automatic, there's also an automatic increase in the scope, because otherwise you're wondering where is the money going? We're just not sure where it's going. So some information on that would be very helpful. Just not to sort of beat a dead horse, but on the emergency regulation issue, obviously there's a huge challenge, and we understand the timing issue that Darren and his staff are trying to deal with. Municipal budgets are often set starting right about now for large cities and counties, and they go through until early spring. So there's a disconnect between our schedules and your schedules for budgeting. But we think it actually makes it worse when you adopt things by emergency regulation, because there's just not that time to talk about it. And there's huge swings in our budget, in our increases. So in 08, 09, it was 19%. Then it was 0. Then it was 0. then it was 35%, then it was 0, and then this year we're proposing 27.5. So as a manager of a city or county, in January you're asking yourself, should I budget in 0% increase in my permit fee or 35%? And there's no middle ground there. And of course, everything else they're budgeting for is 2 to 3% maybe at best. And so again, there's that disconnect between the numbers we're talking about. The swings are just enormous, and there must be some way to sort of smooth those out. We definitely recommend and commend Darren and his staff for putting in a contingency amount there, some kind of reserve to kind of help smooth that out. But it seems like we're in this reaction mode all the time. We want to be we don't want to be reactors, we want to be managers. So we would say, again, some kind of a rebalancing factor or plan that says, okay, when this starts to happen, here's how we rebalance things. For any discharge category you want to look at, but again, give people some certainty. You might say, listen, stormwater, because you've been overpaying for so long, your fees may not go up more than 5% a year for the next X number of years until you're made whole, essentially. Then they could, and every year in January, the managers would say, okay, I'm going to put an extra 5% in my budget if in case the state board uses that 5%. If they don't, great. But I think the 0%, in the years where 0%, it's a too high price to pay for getting the 35% numbers. It's just too much to pay. I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Okay, yeah, that was a good point there at the end. Darren, do you have anything to maybe respond to Jeff's last point about looking forward and maybe a different strategy?
So for his comment on the swings or his comment about the rebalancing?
Yeah, the swings. The last comment.
Yeah, so, you know, we're a bit of a victim of the big fund switches that happened, and you know, I remind people of them all the time, but it doesn't take the sting out of the fact that they were huge increases, and they see the percentages there. And so we had the general fund switch for the regulatory programs, which happened, followed shortly by then the planning programs that were switched. And those big switches certainly were huge increases. There's no denying that. We basically, that's all over. There is no general fund left in this program or these activities. And so I think going forward from here on, we are looking at where we can get to a much more regimented plan of just covering inflation or whatever, you know, program increases or decreases come from the budget. And so I do anticipate that it would be much more steady and that we could try to, once we get a bit of reserve as well, then we can try to map that out and say, look, you know, just inflation says 2% or something like that, and everybody should budget for that, and then we'll see where we end up, you know, and fine tune it. But I do believe we're almost there. We're kind of at the end of that, and this is the last one of those.
Can I make another observation?
Very briefly.
Very brief.
We have a lot of
so
other speakers.
Our fund shift was actually
you get an extra minute just because your increases.
Okay. I thought way too much about this.
That would be a really expensive minute.
And our fund shift was in 2002 and 2003 for stormwater. So in that year, our fees went up 700% actually. So the ones I was talking about in the later years, 19%, 35%, wherever, were actually not fund shift issues for us. They were just overall budget increases over time. So they were not digital jumps. They were sort of analog changes that were happening. So again, I'm not sure we'd be happy with a slow, steady increase than these sort of crazy roller coaster rides. So
Get that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Danny Merkley, California Farm Bureau Federation.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Danny Merkley, California Farm Bureau. I think Bobby stole some of my thunder because the first thing I wrote down here was the blue card says either support, to check either support or oppose. And I'm certainly not standing up here to support the fee schedule, but opposing it would be the same as if I told you I wanted to sleep in tomorrow, so I'm going to oppose the sun coming up. It's not going to work, and it doesn't help. We do very much appreciate the board and staff's considerations for our dairy members, for the current situation and the fact that they can't pass their increases on in their costs. Our other members can't as well. They may not be, many of them, different commodities may not be facing as dire straits as some of those in the dairy community. But nonetheless, this is a little bit of insult to injury. 2 years ago, we saw a 354% increase. This year, we're seeing another increase. We get it. We understand how the process works. We feel it's flawed. But before I get too far off, I want to make sure that you understand we very much appreciate staff's work on this. They are about as open and transparent as anybody I've ever seen in public service, starting with Darren all the way through his staff. They've been very, very good to work with and dealing with difficult times. I've seen them in the years when they did get out a little ahead of the time frame, and the board was a little upset that maybe we were getting ahead of the administration on their budgeting. But somehow this system needs to be addressed. I don't have the answer. I don't like getting up here and criticizing without some sort of a recommendation to solve it. But I think it's going to take a combination of all of us working together and working across the street with the legislature and the administration as well to figure out how to address that. Lastly, since I didn't get up and comment on the cost of compliance piece, the fees, even though we've seen some very large percentage increases, really the tough part has been as these programs grow, as they mature. And this is the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program is a very immature program. I think we're about 10 years now, 8 to 10 years into it. It still has a lot of maturing to do. But as it matures, it grows. As this board directs regional boards like the Colorado River Basin to no longer do what they're doing, but move to an Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program and start to assess the fee. As the North Coast Regional Board starts to develop their program, we're going to see this program increase, staff increase. We don't see this as something that's going to get amortized out over a lot more growers, but more a program that shows all the signs of growing, and so future fee increases. And we have some very serious concerns about that, particularly with a segment, the agricultural segment of the economy that has contributed so much during the downturn in the economy, and it's just tough to swallow. So thank you.
Thank you. Next is Gavin McHugh from the State of California Auto Dismantlers Association. Mr. McHugh, thank you.
Madam Chair and members, Gavin McHugh on behalf of the State of California Auto Dismantlers Association. Just to sort of let you know who we are, we're the folks that process end-of-life vehicles and recycle those parts, do all the detoxing, remove a lot of the metals, mercury switches, do the track and trace on perchlorate, all of the fluids, all of that environmental compliance our members take care of. And while we are concerned about this fee increase, it's going to be about a 32% increase for our members. I think when you couple that at what we're looking at in terms of compliance with the soon-to-be adopted industrial stormwater permit, and we've spent a lot of time looking at that, and we think the costs to comply with that over the next 5 years on average for our members is going to be about $160,000. Now that seems like a lot of money, but that's an increase over what our existing costs are, and that's going to be for putting in additional treatment systems, containment systems to address some of these issues we're dealing with. But I think all of this has to be looked at in the context that our competitors, the bad actors out there, the non-filers, compete directly with us for these end-of-life vehicles. And so as the Water Board, and we respect the good work and your commitment to water quality and environmental protection, but as you pile on additional costs and compliance obligations on these small businesses, our competitors don't have these costs. They don't have a stormwater permit. They don't have to pay these fees. They simply are able to work around the system but do exactly what we do in our business, and we compete directly with them.